12 tips to find a starter tech job. Now, this is based on experience in tech, so that's like sysadmin, DevOps, software developer type roles. Now, some of these ideas will be controversial, and some people will have different ideas about how things should work. Your mileage may vary. So, tip one, don't trust job descriptions. You have to actually talk to the people that you will be working with and ask them about the position. So, at the very least, start out by talking to the person who screens you. And then when you do talk to other people, ask them about the position to really get an idea of what the day-to-day will really be like. So don't worry if you aren't a perfect match for a job description. Job descriptions are a list of ideal skills and are often just a nice to have list. So sometimes job descriptions are just plain inaccurate. For example, many years back, I was interviewing for a Unix engineer position. Now, one of the things listed in the job description was Windows administration skills. So I started brushing up on some Windows administration skills because I was a little bit behind in Windows administration. I was great with Unix, not so much with Windows. So I started brushing up on that. And then on my first day of work, I asked my manager, which servers are we running Windows on? And he says, we will never run Windows on any of our servers ever. So apparently that was really, really inaccurate. And I can only guess that someone in HR put that skill on there just because it's a standard skill they put on, any role of this type. But yeah, just keep in mind the person writing the job description isn't necessarily the person who will be interviewing you, hiring you, or working with you. So yeah, the person who receives your resume probably has multiple other positions that you might even be a better match for. So just get your resume in front of them. A lot of times, if you're not a match for this position, they might have another position that you're a good match for, and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll submit him for this one. Or if not, and you're not a good match for anything, they'll just set it to the side with like the hundreds of other resumes that have been submitted to them. So it's not like it's going to count against you. If a job isn't a perfect match, just send your resume anyways. Well, especially if you're just starting out. Now, if you're more experienced and you have people, recruiters hunting you down and stuff, you're going to give it to the recruiter and they're going to, talk with the manager and you'll have a better idea of whether or not you're a good match. But yeah, they'll submit you for specific jobs. So tip number 2, get your resume right. So copy existing resume formats and wording from someone who's successful and knows what they're doing, and then just customize it for your own experience. Now, I've seen people pay for professional resume preparation and come out with terrible looking resumes. Now, make sure you describe each skill the right way. Avoid awkward wording and copy standard wording from someone else. So that's why you want to do that. So learn the standard terms to describe the skills that you have. So you might be able to just quick list the things you're proficient with or the things you've worked with and what you have experience with, but you got to learn the correct lingo that other people are using, what managers and recruiters are using to describe those terms and how they word things, right? So just make sure you get that right and do as others who have been successful before you have been doing. Now, review your resume over and over. Make sure it looks right and doesn't have any mistakes, spelling, punctuation, grammar, that kind of stuff. Make sure your indentation is right. Sometimes people will have bullet points where some are indented to one level and others are they're inconsistent, and it makes the whole thing look messy and off, like you didn't put any thought into it, and you probably won't put thought into any of the work you do when you're hired. So yeah, next tip number 3, give yourself credit. So exaggerate the importance of what you have done if it makes sense. Be realistic. So don't lie or anything. Just say things in a better way. Now, I've personally been told that I need to do more technological chest thumping. So I've been pretty modest about my skills and what I've done, and that kind of works against me when everybody else is kind of exaggerating what they've done. So at one point early in my career, I told someone that I didn't know SQL or SQL when I actually did. I had been using it for years. So I just didn't feel comfortable saying that I knew it unless I knew all of the syntax for every variation of a command. So right off the top of my head, without any reference, maybe I'd be forgetting some bit of syntax or something like that. So I just said, no, I don't really know it because I didn't feel confident enough. So really, I should have said yes and then given a quick explanation of my skill level. So if they say, do you know SQL? I should just say, oh yeah, I know SQL, but my level is this. Sometimes I got to check a reference, but I basically know how to do this, this, and this. I know how to create databases, insert records, query the database, etc., etc. Tell them what you know, and give some explanation when you say you do know a skill, right? You tell them what your level is. Are you beginner? Are you, even if you are just a beginner, you can tell them that, and you're better off than, even being a beginner in one skill, you're better off than someone who doesn't have that skill at all. So if the other person applying to this job, if you're both equal in every other way, except you have beginner level knowledge with an important skill and they have no knowledge of it at all, that puts you ahead. So just, like I said, give yourself credit. Now, tip number 4, get yourself out there. In the beginning, apply everywhere you can just to get your resume out there. Basically, just spam your resume out there, right? Now, that's in the beginning, because a lot of times it's very tough and you just really got to get it out there. So later on in your career, when you have experience, you don't have to do that at all. People will hunt you down. People will be hunting you down, and it's just a matter of replying to them and saying, you reply to the recruiters that you think are good and that are worth talking to, and go from there. But in the beginning, you kind of have to keep spamming it out. You don't just apply to a bunch of jobs at the beginning and then wait for months and say, oh, one of these, someone's going to contact me. If you haven't put your resume out there, if you haven't applied to something in a while, you're probably not going to hear something back, and you need to send your resume out again. Otherwise, it's gone down to the bottom of the stack. Also, if you've uploaded your resume to a job board at one point, you're going to get a bunch of emails and calls in the first few days and first couple weeks. But then it's going to sort of taper off. And if you were to re-upload the exact same resume, you're going to get a flood of more people trying to contact you, at the beginning when it's fresh. Basically, the idea is that a freshly uploaded resume will get a whole bunch more attention. So just regularly update it and just keep submitting it to jobs, so you'll continue to have people trying to contact you, and you continue, getting set up for phone interviews and so on and so forth, right? So get yourself out there, right? So tip number 5, find a recruiter. So instead of just applying to jobs on a job board, you can speak with a recruiter. So the recruiter could be working for a recruiting agency, or they could be working directly for the company you want to apply it. Now, if you can actually talk directly to a recruiter at the company you want to work for, that's great. That's one less person in the middle, right? But if you got to keep in mind that they have the company's best interest in mind, and they kind of want to give you the lowest salary they can and still get you hired. Now, an agency recruiter will be have more incentive to get you a higher salary. Still, their priority is just getting you hired, even at a lower salary. At least they make something off of you instead of another recruiter getting you in there, getting someone else in there, and they get nothing then. So their priority is just to get you hired, not necessarily to get you the highest salary possible, but they'd prefer to get you the highest salary possible if they can, because they get more of a commission, right? So 2 types of recruiters. So you might want to find one and talk to one. If it's a recruiter at a recruiting agency, they may submit your resume to multiple different positions at different companies, and they'll be able to give you feedback and stuff like that. So it's kind of good to be working with them. You'll know where your resume is. You'll know the status. They'll help set things up for you. So yeah, if you get into contact with an actual recruiter, that's pretty good too. So they will submit you to jobs that they think you are a good match for. So you don't worry so much about your resume being filtered by keywords, and you also might get feedback and status on the application. So tip number 6, keep a spreadsheet of career contacts. So this goes right along with the previous tip. So going back to 2005, when I was first starting out, I once told a recruiter that I wasn't talking to anyone else, but I was actually talking to a lot of other recruiters. I just told them that because it seemed like what I was supposed to say. And it turns out one of the other recruiters I was talking to was actually another recruiter at the same recruiting agency. So he noticed this when I went in to speak with him. So I went in to talk to this recruiter, and he says, "Wait a minute, I think my colleague over in the other room was also talking to you." And it turned out, well, they both had different jobs they could submit me for, and I was interested in both types of jobs. So yeah, that worked out well for me, but it's one example of where you want to kind of keep track of things and keep track of who you've spoken to and who works for which company, that type of things. And once you start contacting a lot of people, it's going to be hard to coordinate who you have a phone interview with, who told you this salary range versus who told you that salary range, who gave you this information, what did they say about this job or that. There's so much information to keep track of, and it gets really hard once you talk to a lot of once you're juggling a lot of recruiters and hiring managers all at the same time, keep remembering their names, stuff like that. What you want to do is create a spreadsheet of people you have already spoken with. Now, this includes names, phone numbers, email addresses, notes about the conversations you had with them, dates of when that conversation was, which agency or company they work for, and the companies that they've submitted you to. So if you're talking to a recruiter from a recruiting agency, you want to keep track of which other companies they've submitted you to, because if you don't and you tell another recruiter to send you to the same companies, the companies are going to come back to them and say, "Hey, someone already sent this," and they're going to come back to you and say, "Hey, why'd you tell us to send you over there when someone else already did?" So just something to keep track of. Now, yeah, so keep a spreadsheet of all of that stuff, and the names of people at those companies and their roles. So not just the recruiters, but if you speak to your potential coworker or a team lead or anyone you speak to, just keep track of their names and what you spoke about. And also good for follow-up interviews. They say, "Hey, did you talk to my coworker, this person?" And you can be like, "Oh yeah, I recognize that name. I have it." And you're really just reading off your spreadsheet, but you can at least know that you talked to the person before. So tip number 7, be flexible and juggle as many different options as you can. So like I said before, keep a spreadsheet or some type of detailed schedule when showing when your interviews are. So before I was saying, keep a spreadsheet of, contacts and people you've spoken to. You're also going to want to probably have another tab on that same spreadsheet, showing when you have interviews and when you have phone calls and stuff like that, and all the times and dates, so you don't get them mixed up and you don't schedule 2 interviews for the same time. So keep a detailed schedule showing when your interviews are and all of the important info for those interviews. Who to call. Are you joining a Zoom call? Are you showing up in person? Are they going to call you? Are you supposed to call into a call to talk to them? You get all that information down, right? So for example, done a phone interview so an example of me being flexible and juggling stuff that worked out in my favor. One time I did a phone interview on the way to an in-person interview for another company while technically still employed at a consulting agency. And that job that I did the phone interview for, I almost missed it and wasn't able to take that phone interview, but that ended up being a job that I ended up working at for years. So I ended up going in for an in-person interview after that and being hired by them, working there for many years, right? So at the time I was working for, I won't say too much more about the specifics of the companies, but just juggling a lot of stuff at once. Now, tip number 8, salary. Be informed. So know how much people are paid for a given position based on the job title, the experience, the location, and the actual company. So different companies tend to pay people more, and different types of companies can afford larger or smaller salaries. So just best to be aware of all of that. So you know what people are being paid at that type of company for that type of position, and so on. And comp. So one other thing to be aware of is how comp might be broken down based on industry. If you're not familiar with this, in tech, like tech companies, say Meta or Google or whatever else, you're generally going to have a base salary, a bonus, and stock options. That's like the standard thing for a tech company. Now in finance, you might have, if you're at an investment bank or hedge fund or something, you might have your base salary and a bonus, but you're not getting stock options generally. So, it's going to be, your total comp would be split between potentially a base salary, a bonus, and a stock option, and you got to weigh all of those things. And you can't necessarily always count on, you might have to wait for stock options to vest, and for bonus, it's not always guaranteed. So, but some companies generally pay, like Amazon, for example, at every role, and no matter how senior, their base salary caps out relatively low, but they generally count on most of your salary being given in the form of a bonus and stock options, right? So in any case, ask other people and discuss and compare salaries. Now, generally this is going to be frowned upon, so don't do it too out in the open, but technically in the US, as far as I know, in every state, it's illegal for a company to discipline you for discussing salaries. That doesn't mean people don't get fired for it. And if nothing else, people, it's frowned upon. So, worth being aware of, but, ask around and get an idea for what people are being paid, because you can have two people sitting side by side doing the exact same role, and one person can be getting paid double what the other person is. And it's not always fair at all, right? So fairness does not come into play here. So yeah, don't necessarily trust the numbers. There are a lot of sites that list average salaries, and a lot of these sites, like the first sites that come up, if you Google for salary for a given role, a lot of times the salaries listed are really low. And that may be because there's a lot of people in low cost of living areas applying for these roles or working these roles. Keep in mind where you are. Like one salary might make you rich if you live in Alabama, but it might make you barely able to get by and living in poverty if you're in New York City, or even more so if you're in Silicon Valley or something, right? So those numbers may be skewed. So one site that I found that gives reasonably good info is levels.fyi. So if you want to get all of the listings for all of the jobs that they have, you have to fill out, your own info and put down, fill in like the company you work for and how much you make to help contribute to this. But once you do this, it will show you a whole big listing of everyone else who has submitted their salaries. So you can get a really good idea of how things break down. It will list things out like software engineer at Google making this much base, this much bonus, and this much for stock options. And you'll see a bunch of different people at each of these companies and how much they've reported making and how their compensation breaks down, right? So also check Reddit. So for example, there's a CS career advice subreddit. Check that subreddit. One thing I've noticed, there's a sysadmin subreddit, and a lot of the people on there seem to be really jaded sysadmins who are basically being abused in their careers. And so you might want to consider which sub you're looking at. So CS career advice, given they do have more software developers, but between them and like DevOps type careers, they tend to, from what I've seen, they tend to be paid more and treated better. And some subreddits will give you better advice for getting higher salaries, and a lot of the people tend to be okay being underpaid, or they'll complain about it, but they won't really be aware that they could be paid so much more. So just be aware of that, but check Reddit, check the jobs and the CS and IT career advice subreddits. A lot of good information to find there as well. So tip number 9, jumping ship. So your first job might be really low if you don't have experience. This might be okay if you can afford it and if you don't have other options. So you could do this purely for the experience so that you can have something to add to your resume. And the whole idea is that once you get this experience, your next job that you jump to will actually pay you an okay salary, or ideally a good salary, right? So if you're just starting out fresh out of college and you can afford to do this, you don't have like a family to feed or something, you might want to pick a job just to get experience. Not that you should always be working just for experience, but at the beginning you do kind of need that experience before you can get an actual good job. So you might work something a little bit lower level, something really low, just to get some experience on your resume. So depending on your situation, you can do that, but just make sure you jump ship after the first year, maybe even sooner. So sometimes you might have no other options, but there's some really horrible option. You could take that and then just hold on to it until something actually okay as a beginner job comes along. But because it's better than nothing. But it depends how you want to work things out. So yeah, if it's a beginner job paying almost nothing and you're working a really low level role, when you're first starting out in your career, it does make sense to jump after that first first year, if you want to actually put that experience to use and be rewarded for your efforts. So if you want that first year of experience to actually be put to use and you actually want to be rewarded for it, don't count on getting that reward from the company you're currently at. You kind of have to jump ship for that. Now, as you amass more experience, you're going to stay at a company for longer and longer. So in the beginning, it makes sense. I know this is frowned upon by a lot of people, controversial and all that, but it makes sense to jump somewhat more frequently when you're first starting out. That's the fastest way to get your salary up there. So yeah, it is tempting, especially when you're first starting out at that first job, before you really have experience working at more than one type of company. It is tempting. You'll see your skills develop over a year and you'll feel like they are taking care of you. Maybe they give you a small increase in what they pay you and you'll feel like your responsibilities are growing. You'll be tempted to just stick around. You'll try to rationalize and say, hey, it's not so bad here. Maybe I have a future here. Maybe I could, you see some other people that have been there for a really long time. But realistically, you're far better off jumping almost all of the time. So don't get trapped by the idea of staying at one company too long. They may give you a raise, but it will be much lower than what is possible if you jump. Now, this is generally going to tend to stay true throughout your career. However, when you're first starting out at those first few jobs, that's much more true, and you generally want to jump more frequently. Probably your first 2 jobs should be 1 year each, and after that, maybe stick around a couple of years per job. After that, you don't want to stick around at any one job for probably more than a couple years, but once you have a lot more experience, you may stick around, especially if your salary kind of caps out. At that point, there may not be much point in jumping at all, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep your eye open for a better opportunity. So most of the experienced people I've spoken to, people who have been around the block a few times, will generally tell you that you should always be looking for a job. I kind of, it's hard because a lot of times you want to go through the whole interview process again. You want to kind of stay in your comfort zone and stay where you are. So don't get trapped by the idea of staying at one company too long. So they may give you a raise, but it will be much lower than what would be possible if you jump. So yeah, jump ship often. You will be punished severely if you don't. So every 1 year at the beginning, your first few jobs, jump every 1 year. And then after that, every 2 years or so. And when you really get up there, maybe stick around a little bit longer, but generally I think 2 years is a good amount of time. And a lot of places won't flag you as a job hopper if you're staying for at least 2 years. Some places will. Some places will see, oh, you've only been here. Some places are a little bit, a little bit more strict about that, and they'll say, oh, you've only been at this position for, 4 years. Some places, but generally it's going to be 2 years. You're probably okay. You should probably have a few places that maybe are a little bit longer than 2 years, especially, towards the end of your career where you have a ton of experience. And that's not to say that, you can't reach a point where your salary is almost capped out and you maybe want to stick around somewhere much longer if you're in a really good place. Now, if you think your salary is capped out, make sure you're correct about that, right? You don't want to, think your salary is capped out when the real range is way higher. So do make sure you talk to people in the industry and do your research. Find out what you're actually worth, right? So yeah, don't worry about being labeled a job hopper. Some people care about this and will point it out, but most won't. Now, remember, you will be punished if you don't hop. If you don't job hop, you will be punished severely. They will pay you less. You will not, even if they give you a good raise, you have the opportunity to make much more by jumping. Also, job security comes from being good at having a lot of skills, so you're valuable, but also being good at interviewing, being comfortable with that interview process, and having the skills to get a new job quickly. That's job security in the modern world. Now, in the past, maybe you could be a really senior level employee, and maybe you wouldn't need that. Maybe you could expect some job security. In the modern world, that's not how things work. So yeah, again, it may be tempting, especially in your very first position. You may get comfortable there. You may not be, you won't have experience having worked at multiple different companies. You might not know what it's like outside that very first company that you've ever worked at. So you may not really know what to look forward to or how things could be different. You don't have a real good frame of reference. So it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking, this isn't so bad. I'm actually being paid an okay wage, especially compared to before you were employed, right? And they give you a little bit more money, a little bit more responsibility, and you'll start feeling a little bit better about your role. But don't let that trap you. Don't lose sight of where you really want to take your career. So, let's see. Tip number 10, don't disclose your salary. So many years back, I've had a recruiter swear to me that the most any company will ever increase my salary by is 15%. Just swear up and down, 15% is the max I could ever have my own salary increased by, no matter what. And this is after telling this person what my current salary was. And then, I've spoken to other recruiters who I didn't disclose my salary to, and they assumed that I was being paid much higher because I was underpaid. And they said that I could be paid in that range, the much higher range. And this is what I went with. My next job ended up paying me, many times more than what I was making at that point. So you could get double, you could get triple what you're currently making, depending on what you're worth. It's possible for your pay to, it's very much possible to be paid triple or double, what you were being paid, assuming you're underpaid enough, right? So it's not based on a percentage of your current salary. It's based on what someone with your experience and skills is actually worth to the company, right? So don't disclose. If you do disclose your current salary, they're suddenly going to anchor to that, and they will never ever pay you, the amount that you really want to be increased by. So be aware of that. Now, if you, so there are even laws that restrict asking a candidate's current salary in many states, New York being one of them. Now, those laws exist to give people a fair chance. So, if you are asked about your salary, generally, you should tell people, instead of telling them what your current salary is, you answer by saying, by giving them the range that you're actually looking for. And this is why you have to do your research, know the range that you want, and tell them the range that you're looking for. And you want to get this out of the way early on so you don't waste everybody's time. But generally you want to tell them what the range you're looking for, rather than you don't just straight up deny the question, well, legal or not, whether it's if it's in a state where it's legal, you still want to avoid it, but you don't directly deny it. And if it's illegal, I still wouldn't, I wouldn't call them out on that, because obviously they don't want to work with you if you're doing that. So if you really want the job, just avoid the question and tell them what you're looking for instead of what you're currently making. And personally, if a recruiter does know what I'm currently making, and I would mark that recruiter as I'd make a little note next to their name in my spreadsheet saying, hey, this recruiter will not pay me anymore. Or sometimes recruiters will lowball me by a lot, and I will mark them off as, hey, don't waste time talking to this person. Whereas, like if I speak to 10 different recruiters and they all tell me one salary, and then I speak to one recruiter and they tell me, the most I can get is half of that, I'm going to just not talk to that recruiter. So if you know what range to expect, mention that to you. If you know the range that you should expect for this role, mention that other people are telling you that this is what they're willing to pay you. So you talk to one recruiter, you can mention that the recruiter before you told you that you could get, this salary. So then, at least you have something to go on. You can't just say, oh, I want this super high salary. You can say, well, someone else was already telling me that companies are hiring at this rate and that they want to submit me to somewhere. And you may not necessarily have to lie for that. You can ask people what they're paying and then write that down, and that way you have a frame of reference for the next recruiter that you talk to. So if you know what to expect, you can mention that. And if you've had job offers in the past, maybe you turned them down for whatever reason, you can use that as a frame of reference just to give them an idea. And you can see if they're willing to pay you in line with the same amount. So in any case, just know what you're worth and don't disclose your salary unless the exception to this is if you are not looking to increase your pay. Maybe you've done your research and you found you really are capped out on salary. You're not going to get much more, but maybe you're leaving just because you want to work on a different type of project. You want a less stressful job, better schedule, something like that. You might it might not matter then if you just want to keep your salary the same or close to the same and you don't care about a big increase. Then by all means, disclose your salary if you're exactly where you want to be. Maybe you just want a tiny increase, but you're really just looking for a change of scenery. Then yeah, in that case, it might be totally fine to disclose your salary. Most cases don't, though. Most cases, just tell them what you're shooting for. So tip number 11, don't accept a counteroffer. So what I mean by this is that if you currently have a job and you have applied for a new job and your new job gives you an offer and you go and give your 2 weeks notice and your current company you're working for gives you a counteroffer telling you, hey, we'll pay you just as much or we'll match that amount or give you more to stay. Don't accept this counteroffer. Once you've given your 2 weeks notice, just leave. Don't accept any counteroffers. And there's a reason for this. So, if you receive a job offer, your current employer may give you a counteroffer. Just don't take this. Usually companies do this to buy time to prepare for your departure. So they're just buying time. So they will prepare a replacement and then let you go. But by the time that they do this, you won't have a new job lined up. So like right now, when you're ready to leave, you have a good job lined up. But if you accept the counteroffer, they're going to let you go a few months later and you won't have a job lined up, right? So you'll be losing your job there and you won't have a new one lined up. So it kind of puts you in a bad position, right? So yeah, do not take the counteroffer. Lots of people experience this. This has happened to a lot of people. A lot of people report this. I've seen this happen to people I've worked with. I've seen people have a good job lined up. They accept the counteroffer. A few months later, they are cut loose and the company tells them, well, we can't afford you anymore. Goodbye. So yeah, most people who accept counteroffers end up leaving within a year anyways. Now, this is either going to be the company will let them go, or in the rare case that the company doesn't let them go, they will leave the company on their own because they're still unhappy. Maybe, they really wanted more money. Like sure, they can get an increase, but then they're going to want more after that. And even if it's not about money, a lot of times people are leaving because they don't like management, they don't like the role, they're unhappy with some other aspect of the job, so they'll leave anyways. So bottom line, if you were going to leave, just stick with this decision. Now, let's see. So yeah, don't accept the counteroffer. Now, tip number 12, networking. Networking is super important. This is one of the top ways that people find jobs. Being recommended or directly hired by someone that helps a lot. So this is one of the number one ways to find a job. Definitely something you should be on top of. Always keep in touch with people that you've worked with in the past. Contact them periodically just to stay in touch, catch up, see how things are. Make sure you talk to people and meet people at each job that you work at, just so you can build your network and know people, right? That is just a super important thing. So this probably should have been one of the top number one skills, but any case, that is kind of an obvious one that everybody says this. Any list of this type, people are going to list that first. That probably should be one of the top things. But anyways, I'm listing it last, but that's the 12th tip. But I actually have another tip. So beyond those 12 tips, I have one extra bonus tip. So the dress code for the interview. So make sure so I guess tip number 13, the bonus tip. Make sure that you know the dress code for the interview. So some places might be a suit and tie, other places might be t-shirt and jeans. So you want to seem like a cultural fit, so you should dress like an average applicant for this particular job dresses. So this is a normal thing to ask the recruiter. A lot of people ask this question. They say, hey, is it, how do I know the dress code? What should I wear? It's okay to explicitly ask the recruiter or the person you're talking to, what's the normal dress code like? What are people normally wearing? Just explicitly ask them. If you don't know, then ask them. It's a normal thing to ask a recruiter. So, obviously do ask. Now, I've had companies like, for example, investment banks. you wear a suit and a tie, right? People will wear the day-to-day clothing would be like maybe slacks and a button-up shirt. Managers wear a tie. If you're going to an interview, wear a full suit and a tie, right? So also, I've interviewed at places like Meta, for example, back when they were Facebook. So for that, I wore t-shirt and jeans. So same deal with LinkedIn. A lot of the people there, it's a California tech company. People wear t-shirt and jeans to the interview. At Facebook, I saw people coming in wearing like shorts and a t-shirt for the interview. There's no dress code for that. And yeah, so that's the difference between like a California tech company and like a New York City investment bank, right? That's not to say there aren't companies in finance there are companies in finance who are also very casual too. So don't just make that decision based on whether it's tech versus finance. Just know the company and the culture. You want to be a cultural fit. Just ask the recruiter. That's an easy way to get past that. And yeah, that's about it for today. So hopefully you found this useful. And if not useful, maybe interesting, fun video to watch. If you think I provided you some value, give me a thumbs up. Definitely hit that subscribe button for more content like this. But also, a lot of our content is not like this. A lot of the content is more tech stuff, more actual practical tech stuff. We cover a lot of Linux stuff, servers, coding, scripting, automation, do like anything tech related, Raspberry Pis, electronics, networking, robots, all kinds of great tech stuff you're not going to want to miss out on. If you want your YouTube feed to have all that kind of stuff and be that much better, definitely hit that subscribe button and hit the little bell icon so you can get YouTube will actually notify you when we come out with new videos. And yeah, if you have your own tips or if you disagree with any of these tips, definitely remember to leave a comment down below letting me know that you would disagree or what your own opinion is, because we definitely want to hear your opinion. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you guys on that next video.